1876. American Manifest Destiny is in full swing. Millions travel west, seeking fertile land and gold. There are new towns, new cities, and railroads that cross the country. But the Wild West, as it has been dubbed, is neither wild nor empty. For countless generations, Indian nations have lived across the land. They are under constant attack from white settlers, pushed onto ever smaller, ever poorer reservations. Reservations which the United States government does not respect and takes from as it sees fit. The largest of these is the Great Sioux Reservation. Among the most aggressive and militarized, they have claimed this land as their own after being pushed westward by the United States. For a time, there is peace. Then, gold is discovered on their lands. Suddenly, old treaties cease to have meaning. Prospectors and settlers trickle in, soon backed by the United States military. They are itching for any excuse to drive the natives out for good. When native bands refuse to remain on their starving reservations and venture out to forage for food, the United States orders 3 columns to attack. But progress is meager. It's not until June that the 2 northern columns unite, while the 3rd is driven back. By now, winter has passed. The natives are at their most formidable, in high summer, with fodder and forage plentiful. The U.S. Army Command, incensed by the lack of progress, detaches George Armstrong Custer with 700 cavalry to find and attack the largest native force, forming under the leadership of Chief Sitting Bull. Custer, brave and reckless, believes that his disciplined troops will rout any native resistance. On the 25th of June, he finds the enemy camp, 3,000 warriors in a valley on the banks of the Little Bighorn River. Fearing the enemy will escape, he decides to attack that afternoon. The primary target for Custer is the enemy camp followers. Their capture is key leverage for negotiations. So, Custer divides his force into 3 groups. The first, 295 men under Captain Benton, will guard the baggage train and act as a reserve. The second, 175 men, under Major Reno, will cross the Little Bighorn River to the south and attack directly into the native camp. The third, 221 men, led by Custer himself, will swing north along the eastern bank of the river, using the hills and ravines to obscure his advance. This will place him in perfect position to fall on the fleeing non-combatants. At 3 p.m., Major Reno crosses the Little Bighorn. The attack begins. Pushing aside native skirmishers, his men dismount and form into 3 firing lines, just outside the enemy camp. But he has severely underestimated the enemy's resolve. Rather than flee, several hundred warriors have formed up. They launch an all-out counterattack. Reno's line fights bravely, but while the right flank is well anchored on the river, the left is wide open. As native riders begin to exploit the weakness, Reno suddenly orders a retreat. The warriors pursue. Reno is able to rally his men and form a second line in dense woodlands. Their accurate, disciplined fire pours into the attacking bands. Several charges are broken under a hail of lead. Amidst the chaos of the battle, Major Reno turns to a local guide, seeking advice. Suddenly, the man is shot through the head, covering Reno in gore. Thoroughly shaken, Reno cries out, "All those who wish to make their escape, follow me!" Confusion reigns, as some join Reno, while others who don't hear stay and fight. It is now a mad scramble to escape the pursuing warriors. Many are killed. The attacks only stop at 4 p.m., when Bentine's reserve finally arrives to reinforce the line. In just 1 hour, Major Reno has lost 77 men, 40% of his original force. What's worse, they are in no position to support Custer, who is now riding alone and unaware towards the entire native army. While Reno sets off to attack the native camp from the south, Custer takes his 200 men north. Custer, advancing slowly and around hills, can hear the distant sounds of battle and decides to detach 80 men to attack the native camp from the east. At first, they meet minimal resistance. Then, enemy numbers begin to swell. The entire native army is shifting away from the beaten Reno to the now heavily exposed Custer. The Federals begin to pull back, fending off attempts to encircle them. Still, Custer does not realize the danger he is in. He remains fixated on taking hostages and destroying the enemy camp. The advance will continue. Moving west with a third of his men to search for potential hostages, he leaves the rest in a defensive formation. At the front, a thin skirmisher outpost. Behind them, on a hill, the main body of troops in firing line. Further back, a reserve, along with a small force sent to stop a spotted flanking maneuver. Unbeknownst to the 7th Cavalry, they are now completely surrounded by the native army. Fighting quickly escalates as dozens of native warriors turn into hundreds. Then 1,000. The skirmishers are quickly overrun. Survivors rally around the main line as the natives close in. A hail of lead pours into their advance. The natives stagger back. Then, a band of warriors sweeps up from the south, charging into the line. Brutal hand-to-hand combat ensues. One by one, men flee to the final reserve line as chaos grips the formation. But the chaos of the second line's retreat is contagious as they flee into the reserve. The formation is disorganized and confused. Before long, the enemy is upon them. The reserves put up a stiff fight, but a cavalry charge from the rear by Chief Crazy Horse shatters any remaining cohesion. The few survivors ride to Custer's position. Until now, Custer could only watch the disaster engulfing his own force. Horrified, he nevertheless rallies the remnants of his command and retreats to a small hill. There, he can see the massive enemy host bearing down on him. There is no hope of escape. Forming into a circle and using the bodies of dead horses as cover, Custer makes his last stand. Meanwhile, Benton, along with several other officers, are finally in sight of Custer's position. They are too few, too late, as the last of Custer's men are unceremoniously picked off, one by one. The survivors pull back to their baggage train and fend off a series of skirmishes throughout the night. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was a disaster for the United States. Overly ambitious and without proper respect for their adversary, Custer's command has suffered 46% casualties, along with the loss of half the officers. Native casualties are around half that. While enshrined in popular myth as a doomed but valiant venture, in reality, the Battle of the Little Bighorn was an overzealous blunder into an enemy force. Despite victory, the outcome of the war was not in doubt. The war draws to a close in May 1877. Though defeated and eventually subjugated, the defiant stand of the Indian tribes remains a shining moment in the resistance to westward expansion. One which will never be forgotten on those banks of the Little Bighorn.